Jake sat at the kitchen counter, the glow of his phone illuminating the quiet darkness of the house. The air smelled faintly of Emily's perfume, a scent he had once loved, but now found almost suffocating. His fingers hovered over the screen, rereading the message he had found just moments ago. "Last night was amazing. Same time next week?" Ryan. Jake's chest tightened, but he didn't react outwardly. He had learned long ago that emotions were like weapons. You had to wield them carefully. Explosions were for the weak. The truly dangerous men were the ones who stayed quiet, who let their enemies believe they were safe. And right now, Emily and Ryan thought they were safe. Jake locked his phone and exhaled slowly, methodically. He wasn't surprised, not really. He had seen the signs. Emily's late nights, the way her phone was always face down, the sudden disinterest in their marriage. But seeing confirmation of her betrayal in black and white made something inside him harden. He had options. Option 1, confront her, yell, scream, demand answers. No, too messy, too predictable. Option 2, walk away, let her and Ryan have their little fantasy. But that wasn't who he was. No, Jake had something else in mind. He reached for his phone again, but this time he didn't text Emily. He texted Laura. 20 minutes later, Laura's voice came through the speakerphone, clipped and controlled. "How sure are you?" she asked. Jake could hear the tension in her tone, but there was no hysteria, no raw emotion. That was why he had called her. Laura wasn't the type to cry and break down. She was like him, calculating, patient, and dangerous when wronged. "I have proof," Jake said, fingers drumming against the countertop. "A message from Ryan." A pause. "Send it." Jake forwarded the screenshot and waited. A full minute passed before she spoke again, her voice quieter, but steel-edged. "We're going to ruin them." A slow smile tugged at the corner of Jake's mouth. "Exactly what I was thinking." The plan formed between them in hushed tones, their voices laced with something dark and unforgiving. Emily and Ryan had no idea that their betrayal had set something into motion. They believed they were playing a game. They were wrong. Jake and Laura were about to teach them what real strategy looked like. Jake leaned against the cool leather of his car seat, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel as he waited. The city around him pulsed with life, horns blaring, neon signs flickering, but his mind was locked onto one thing: revenge. Laura arrived minutes later, sliding into the passenger seat with the same composed energy that had always made her an enigma. Her dark eyes flicked to Jake's face, searching for hesitation. She found none. "Tell me everything," she said, fastening her seatbelt like they were preparing for war. Jake handed her a folder meticulously compiled screenshots of texts, photos, and hotel reservations. Laura flipped through them, her expression unreadable, but Jake caught the subtle clench of her jaw, nervously admired the sketch. "They may have been this for months," she murmured, her fingers brushing over the most damning evidence. A hotel bill from last week. A selfie Ryan had taken in Emily's car. A dinner reservation made under a fake name, but paid with their shared credit card. Laura let out a slow exhale. "They're sloppy," Jake smirked. They got comfortable. Laura closed the folder and met his gaze. "So, what's the play?" Jake pulled out his phone and opened a calendar app. "They think they've got time. They're still sneaking around, thinking we're in the dark. So, we set the stage. We lead them exactly where we want them." Laura's lips curved slightly. "A public exposure?" Jake nodded. "But not just public, unforgettable." Laura considered this, then leaned back against the seat, her fingers tapping her knee as she thought. "We need to make sure they don't see it coming. If they even get a whiff that we know, they'll turn it around, play the victims, or worse, try to cut their losses and disappear." Jake pulled out his phone again and scrolled through his messages. "We need bait," he said. "Something to make them feel like they're in the clear, like they've won." Laura arched an eyebrow. "You have something in mind?" Jake smirked. "How do you feel about a double date?" She blinked, then laughed, the sound low and dark. "Oh, that's evil." "Exactly." They hashed out the details quickly. A weekend dinner, something celebratory, something that would force Emily and Ryan to be in the same room with them, pretending everything was normal. A carefully chosen venue where their closest friends and family would be gathered. And of course, the final act. Undeniable proof. Delivered at the perfect moment. Jake could already picture the look on Emily's face when she realized she had been cornered. The way Ryan's smirk would fade when he saw that there was no way out. But this wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about making sure they felt every ounce of betrayal they had inflicted. And once they did, there would be nothing left for them but ruin. Jake and Laura spent the next few days weaving the perfect illusion. It had to be seamless, no sudden changes in behavior, no hints that anything was amiss. If Emily and Ryan even suspected they were being set up, they'd either run or try to spin the narrative in their favor. So Jake played the role of the oblivious husband. He still kissed Emily goodbye in the morning, still asked about her day with the same casual interest he had before. If she felt guilty, she didn't show it. In fact, she had been even more affectionate lately, perhaps a sign that she and Ryan had talked about making their affair permanent. Laura played her part just as well. She still laughed at Ryan's jokes at dinner, still asked about his work, still pretended to be the devoted wife who had no idea her husband was betraying her. But behind her sharp, knowing gaze, there was something cold brewing. Something Ryan was too arrogant to notice. The plan hinged on a simple but deadly trap. A double date. It wasn't uncommon for the four of them to go out together. That's what made it so perfect. They wouldn't question it. Laura texted Emily first, suggesting they all celebrate an upcoming business deal Ryan had landed. Emily agreed almost too quickly, eager to keep up the facade. "Ron," Laura murmured to Jake later that night. They were sitting in her kitchen, both nursing cups of coffee as they finalized the details. Jake nodded. "They'll think it's a casual night out, but by the end of it, they'll wish they never showed up." Laura tapped her fingernails against the table, considering. "We need to control the setting. If they feel too exposed, they might try to talk their way out of it." Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "I already took care of that. I booked a private dining room at Halston's." Laura's eyebrows lifted. "The place with the floor-to-ceiling glass walls?" "Exactly," Jake said. "The main restaurant will be packed and the room is enclosed but still visible. When we drop the truth, they won't be able to run. They'll have an audience." Laura smirked. "Poetic. And the evidence?" Jake slid a flash drive across the table. "I've got texts, call logs, hotel receipts, and even a few voice recordings." Laura picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "They have no idea what's coming." "No," Jake agreed, his expression dark. "But they will." The final piece of the plan was set. Over the next 2 days, Jake and Laura made sure everything was ready. They confirmed the reservations, ensured their closest friends and family would be at the restaurant, and, most importantly, acted as if they were completely in the dark. Emily and Ryan were walking straight into their own destruction, and neither of them had the slightest clue. The night arrived, and everything was in place. The restaurant hummed with soft conversation and the clinking of glasses, an elegant and intimate setting. The private dining room at Halston's was set up just as Jake had planned, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, giving the diners outside a perfect view of what was about to unfold. Jake arrived first, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his expression calm and unreadable. He was the perfect image of a man enjoying a night out, not a husband about to destroy his cheating wife's world. Laura followed minutes later, her poise effortless, her fitted black dress giving her an air of quiet authority. They exchanged a subtle nod. No words needed. Then came the guests of honor. Emily walked in, laughing lightly, her arm brushing Ryan's as they entered. She looked radiant, completely at ease, completely unaware. Ryan, ever the charmer, pulled out a chair for her before taking his own seat across from Jake. If either of them had any doubts, they didn't show it. The first part of the evening was a performance. Laura complimented Ryan on his latest business deal. Emily gushed about how hard Jake had been working lately. Jake nodded along, sipping his whiskey, while Laura swirled the wine in her glass. They let Emily and Ryan bask in the comfort of their deception, letting them think that tonight was just another dinner. But then the conversation shifted. "So, Ryan," Jake said casually, setting his glass down, "tell me, what's the secret to keeping a relationship exciting?" Ryan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Spontaneity," he said, glancing at Emily. "Knowing what your partner needs before they even say it." Emily giggled. "That's true, it's all about keeping things fresh." Laura let out a soft hum, tilting her head. "That's interesting," she said, "because I think spontaneity is what gets people caught." A flicker of something crossed Emily's face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "What do you mean?" she asked, still playing along. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, and suddenly the room was filled with the sound of Ryan's voice. "Last night was amazing. Same time next week?" The laughter died instantly. Ryan froze, his smirk vanishing. Emily stiffened, her face draining of color. The realization hit them both at once. This wasn't just dinner. This was a setup. Jake leaned forward, his voice steady. "How long did you think you could keep this up?" Laura placed a flash drive on the table. "Everything's on here," she said, her tone almost bored. "Texts, hotel receipts, even your little whispered promises." Emily's hand shot out to grab Jake's wrist. "Jake, let's talk about this." He pulled away smoothly, his expression colder than she had ever seen. "No, Emily," he said. "We're past talking." And with that, the real show began. Silence gripped the room. The weight of it pressed down on Emily and Ryan, their confident smirks long gone. The restaurant outside remained oblivious for now, the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses providing a cruel contrast to the destruction unfolding inside the glass-walled private dining room. Jake let the silence linger. He wanted them to feel it, to drown in it. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for his wrist again. "Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "let's just step outside for a minute. We can talk, just the two of us." Jake looked at her, tilting his head slightly, studying her the way a scientist might observe a failed experiment. "You want to talk now?" His voice was calm, measured, but there was an edge beneath it, something sharp and final. "Where was that desire to talk when you were sneaking off to hotels with my best friend?" Ryan finally found his voice, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Jake, come on, man. Don't." Jake interrupted smoothly, his gaze slicing into Ryan like a scalpel. "You don't get to man me, not after this." "Ah!" Laura exhaled, slow and deliberate. She wasn't one for unnecessary dramatics, but watching Ryan squirm filled her with quiet satisfaction. "Here's how this is going to go," she said, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Jake and I, we're done playing the fool. We're done being lied to, and most importantly," she picked up the flash drive and turned it between her fingers, "we're done protecting you." Emily's breathing grew shallow. "What does that mean?" "It means," Jake said, leaning back in his chair, "that we made sure this dinner wasn't just for us. You see, Emily, Laura, and I weren't the only ones who deserved to know the truth." Almost on cue, the restaurant's main doors opened and a few familiar faces entered. Emily turned her head, and when she saw them, her breath hitched. Jake's parents, Laura's sister, Ryan's business partner, a few of their closest friends, and all of them were heading toward the dining room. Emily's lips parted in horror. "You?" "Yes," Jake said, his voice low and lethal. "We invited them." Panic flashed in Ryan's eyes as his business partner approached. The man's expression was unreadable, but his presence alone was enough to send a cold sweat down Ryan's back. Emily turned to Laura, her face desperate now. "Laura, please, this isn't..." "This isn't what?" Laura asked coolly. "What it looks like? Save it, Emily. I've heard enough lies for a lifetime." Ryan shot up from his seat, knocking his glass over in the process. "This is bullshit," he muttered, running a hand through his hair, his usual confidence now replaced with visible panic. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." Jake chuckled. Low, dark, humorless. "A bigger deal?" He gestured toward the guests who were now standing just outside the glass walls looking in. "I don't know, Ryan. I think betrayal and deceit are a big deal." Ryan's business partner took a step forward, his expression cold. "Ryan, is this true?" Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Emily, her face pale, turned to Jake. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded. "We can fix this." Jake regarded her for a moment, then slowly pulled a folded document from his pocket and placed it on the table. "Divorce papers." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Jake leaned in, his voice quiet but unyielding. "You don't get to fix this. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed. You lied to me. You disrespected me. You took everything I gave you and spit on it." His jaw tightened. "So now, you deal with the consequences." Ryan looked at Laura, his own desperation mounting. "A lawyer. You'll be hearing from me soon." A silence heavier than before settled between them. The weight of their actions, the finality of their downfall, it was sinking in now. There was no way out. No lie, no manipulation could save them. Jake stood first, Laura followed. Without another word, they turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Emily and Ryan to face the wreckage they had created. As they stepped outside, Jake let out a slow breath. Laura glanced at him. "You okay?" He gave a small nod. "Yeah." A pause. "We did what we had to do." Laura smirked slightly. "And we did it well." Jake couldn't help but agree. Behind them, inside that glass-walled room, Emily and Ryan were left alone, trapped in the ruins of their own making.